Hey y'all, Stephanie here with Minimalist Mom Life. Welcome back to my channel. I'm going to make another short but sweet video from the van here while I'm waiting at a practice from one of my kids. I wanted to talk about looking at minimalism through a Christian worldview perspective. If you follow me on Instagram when I was posting there, that is definitely, I feel like, the angle that I took when it comes to talking about minimalism and budgeting and contentment. And I think it can be, for those of us that are believers, I think it can be a really meaningful, powerful, impactful way to look at how we are stewarding our homes and how we are stewarding our money. You can look at minimalism simply for the beauty of the aesthetics. You can look at minimalism for the time efficiency, which y'all know I love, and just spending less time cleaning, having more time to spend with your family or your hobbies or whatever. You can look at minimalism and desire it for the peace that it can bring you, in the sense that, like, things are more calm and more in control. And so there's different ways to look at minimalism. And I'm not going to say that those are bad ways, but when those are the only motivation you have for simplicity, I think a few things can happen, because those are lenses of self, right? We're looking at how this can serve me. It's not a really strong motivator. So it can be something that very easily puts us just in a cycle of self-improvement, or the cycle of simplicity to level up or upgrade our lifestyle. So we're getting rid of the old stuff just to bring in new stuff. We're getting new stuff and getting rid of the old stuff just because we wanted new stuff and we didn't want clutter. But really, we're on this cycle of just constantly buying, and maybe we're not buying and keeping the old stuff, but we're still on that cycle of just being consumers and being discontent and always looking for more and new and better, even if it's in, simplicity. I often see the idea of capsule wardrobes thrown out in minimalism, but a lot of times the people doing capsule wardrobes are buying way more clothes each season to make a capsule wardrobe than I think many people do in years' time that aren't making capsule wardrobes, but are just wearing the same clothes they've worn for the last 3 or 4 years and maybe getting 1 or 2 new pieces. So minimalism doesn't automatically mean that it's budget friendly, that it's really consumer conscious, that it's really selfless, that it's really others focused. It can actually be, I think, a way to be selfish, actually. Some of the slow living, simple living can maybe be biblical, and some of it can maybe be really self-centered, about protecting my peace at all costs, never living sacrificially, never giving of my time when it's inconvenient, never giving of my home or my space, never allowing there to be anything out of my control. That's maybe not, in my head, really biblical. But then I think you can look at minimalism and you can say, from a biblical worldview, how would I apply this to my life? Now, that is not taking minimalism and saying, I'm going to take scripture out of context and say that Jesus calls everyone to be a minimalist. I'm not doing that. What I'm saying, as a Christian, if I'm going to do anything, I'm going to look at doing that thing from a biblical worldview and see, can I look at it through that lens, and how does it change that for me? So if I look at something like minimalism through a biblical lens, and what I'm looking at is, if I'm spending less money on myself and on stuff for myself and my family, then I have more money to give. If I am less attached to my stuff because I have decided that stuff is not that important, then when other people need stuff that I have, I am more willing to give of the stuff that I have. If I am less consumed by the appearance of things and more concerned with how things really are. My home might be beautiful, but do my kids feel like they're less than while they're in it? My home might be beautifully decorated and sparkly clean, but do people feel uncomfortable in my home? I might be in perfect control of the laundry, but not my mouth. So looking at minimalism for not just this outward appearance, but maybe simplifying so we can do the real heart work and the real calling out to Christ for the important stuff to get fixed, not just the appearance of things. But I think taking that separation from, we live in the world and we're not of the world. And so my home can look different. I can look like I'm a missionary. I can look like this world is not the most important thing to me, because it's not, right? Because I have separated myself from allowing the beauty of my home and stuff and my own appearance to be an idol that it was never meant to be. And I have said, Christ, you have to be supreme. You have to be above all else. And that means that stuff and money and appearances are going to have to come after you. And a way that I can express that is by separating myself from an abundance of stuff, from a constant pursuing of stuff. Because again, you can be minimalist and still always be getting new stuff. You're just always decluttering. You can be minimalist and actually be more obsessed with stuff than people who aren't minimalist, because you're so obsessed with how much you do or do not have. And I don't want any of that. I want Christ to be my treasure. And the other side of that is I don't want minimalism to be a way that I seek to control my world in a way that is not healthy. I don't want it to be that. I want minimalism to be the fruit of a heart that is focused on Christ, and that is thinking of the treasure I store up in heaven and not the treasure here. Not one that is gripping to every last little checklist and every last little decluttering pile saying, this is where my worth is. No, my worth is not in how I keep my home or how much stuff I do or do not have. My righteousness is not in how many dresses or clothes are in my closet. I have no righteousness. But Christ, death and resurrection, has paid the price that when God sees me, he sees Christ's righteousness. It's not about Stephanie and what she does or doesn't have. And so minimalism isn't this earning of some status. Rather, it's out of an incredible love for Christ, out of an incredible love for the people that he's put in my life. I want this area of my life to be small, so this area of my life can be huge. And as I've lived a simplified life, I've seen where there have been opportunities to give and opportunities to share and opportunities to help people that I wouldn't have the time or the finances for if I was living in a regular way. And that's not to say people that aren't minimalists don't have the time and don't have the money, because some people just juggle way more things than other people, and lives are all different. But I know for me, there are things that we have been able to do through God's grace that I think would have been so much harder if I was still trying to be caught up in all of these other things. So that's minimalism from a biblical perspective. That's like, how does this work with how God has called me to live? And I will tell you that when your values come from your convictions and not from trends and not from how clean your house is, but from really a heart that is rooted in, I am a pilgrim here. This is not my forever home. I am a missionary here. God has a plan for my life, and he has called me to take up my cross, and he has called me to follow after him. And the white picket fence life is not something I was ever promised. Then your ability to let go of things and stay letting go of things and not grasp back for new and better constantly, I think it's a lot stronger. I really encourage you, if you're new to wanting to simplify, but you seem to never really get all the way there, is to look at, I've talked about this even if you're not a believer, but find out what your why is. And the stronger your why is for why you're doing something, and the more unified that is with your spouse especially, then it's going to have longevity. It's not going to be something that you're forever. I don't think about minimalism unless I'm making a video. It's not a word that comes up in my regular life. It's not part of my personality, I don't think. But it is a value system for me that's deeply rooted in my convictions and how I think God's called me to live my life.